All right, welcome to part 5 of Enlightenment in the Revolutionary World. Now we're going to talk about the effects of the American Revolution. The American Revolution had profound effects not only on the United States that's going to be created out of it, but on Europe as well. Now, for the United States, what it's going to lead to is ultimately the Constitutional Convention of 1787. This is important because this is where we're going to see and show not only Americans but Europe as well a demonstration of Enlightenment ideas put into practice, right? America is a nation that created itself through the Declaration of Independence that followed the philosophy of John Locke that argued that governments are instituted by the people through a social contract, and the government is instituted to protect their lives, liberty, and property, right? And therefore, since the power is derived from the people, it can also be revoked by the people. So the Americans continue to follow Locke in 1787 by instituting that new contract, right? The Constitution of the United States. They also are going to follow Montesquieu in establishing a government that called for a separation and balancing of power among 3 branches of government and a balance of monarchy, aristocracy, and democracy. Right? They're going to follow Voltaire in establishing freedom of expression and freedom of religion and failing to establish a state church. They're going to follow Rousseau by establishing wide franchise, right? Adult property free males, right? Which is broad enfranchisement, broad suffrage for that time period at least, right? And also reserving localized political power communities, right? States. The state power aspect of the Constitution is in there as well, right? And so the Constitution and this federal government is formed despite a lot of difficulties in the process, right? Economic calamity, right? That loss of trade with Britain for a time, Shays Rebellion prior to the Constitution, and the Whiskey Rebellion afterwards, so internal unrest. And ultimately, though, the Republic is going to survive and become stronger, mostly through the influence of the document itself, the Constitution of the United States, and the steadying prestige and influence of its first real leader, George Washington. But the American Revolution would also have an effect on Europe as well, and of course specifically Great Britain, right? Great Britain, the loss of America was a blow to its prestige. The trade with America was cut off. It eventually will recover. They will reestablish it and begin to grow it. Whigs in Parliament will begin to launch a series of economic reforms. They'll call it the Economical Reform Movement to make the British government cheaper and more streamlined, more efficient. It'll also create a wave of electoral reform in Britain, enfranchisement. Britain is still going to retain Canada, which supplied it fur and timber, and it's going to still have possessions in the West Indies, which supplied sugar and helped support the African slave trade, which at this time, until 1808, Britain was still the primary transport for the Atlantic slave trade, right? And ultimately, too, trade will be reestablished with the United States and grow, which for Britain ultimately will be beneficial, right? They're going to get all the benefits of colonial ownership without the responsibility, right, by establishing these trade networks. For France, I mean, they, of course, got the initial satisfaction of sticking it to the British and causing them to lose their American colonial possessions there. But the end of the war had actually sent France into bankruptcy. The monarchy was broke, and it began to cause resentment, a resentment that grew and ultimately paved the way to the French Revolution.